This works.
All right, thank you and welcome. Today is August 12th. It's 5:30 p.m. and let's call this meeting of the Port of Olympia Commission to order. And as usual, let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Sanders, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
All right, thank you very much. And we have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
Motion to, oh, no. So we have a request to move to amend the agenda so that action item H2 proceeds pending issues or business items G1 and G2, as well as action item H1. Almost. Almost.
Let's, okay, so you're motioning to approve the agenda,
I move to approve the agenda.
and Sarah has seconded that motion. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Motions to amend the motion.
Whatever you want to talk about.
Well, you go ahead, Megan. Now would be the right, now you can make the motion to amend.
Okay. To avoid having Panattoni staff wait significantly for their action item, I suggest an agenda amendment as follows: to move to amend the agenda so that action item H2 proceeds pending issues or business items G1 and G2, as well as action item H1.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to amend the agenda so that action item H2 precedes pending issues or business items G1 and G2, as well as action item H1. Does everybody understand that? Action item H2.
Option to ground lease Fifth Amendment
We're moving that to,
After the consent calendar.
so we're making it H1.
Or G. No, we're putting it in before pending issues.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I would just mention for those who weren't here last time, this item was moved to the very end of the agenda on a 3-hour meeting. So I think in consideration for our guests, this would make sense.
Okay, any other discussion? All right, on the amendment, on the motion to amend the agenda, which the motion is to amend the agenda so that action item H2 precedes pending issues or business items G1 and G2, as well as action item H1. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? The motion carries to amend the agenda. Is there any other discussion on this evening's agenda? Hearing none, I will call for the vote of to approve the agenda as amended. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
All right.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we have an amended agenda, which leads us right directly into the executive director report.
Excellent. Thank you, Commission President Ayal. Right. So, let's see. I've got the clicker. It's not. Did I not turn it on? Is it really? Ooh, well, that will burn me. All right then. Here we go. So first up is we wanted to thank the Port of Kalama. The Port Commissioners and our leadership team held a budget retreat on August 5th at the Port of Kalama, and we wanted to go ahead and do it at the Port of Kalama to be able to take advantage of seeing the beautiful things that the Port of Kalama has done on its waterfront, and to take advantage of hearing from the Port's Executive Director, Mark Wilson, on all the ways that the Port of Kalama has managed to achieve all these beautiful things on their waterfront. And so we, let's see, we were inspired by the port's strategic approaches, and also really had some great conversations amongst the staff and the commission, and really felt like we got some great alignment on where we want to go and how we can advance our strategic initiatives through thoughtful financial stewardship. And also wanted to say we understand and acknowledge that we did not do as good a job as we should have on noticing the meeting. So making sure we had a recording available soon after the meeting. So we will do better when we next hold a meeting on site. All right, and then on that same day, Sean Gilbertson, who is our Director of Environmental Programs, spent part of the day with Congresswoman Strickland here in downtown Olympia, together with the City of Olympia, the Department of Enterprise Services, LOT, and the Squaxin Island Tribe. The purpose was to share with the Congresswoman all the various projects that each of these entities has going that are that sort of interrelate, and includes the Deschutes Estuary restoration, the city's efforts to become more resilient to sea level rise, as well as our Bud Inlet cleanup. And the Congresswoman very much appreciated it. We also had Senator Murray's staff person, local staff person, Daniel Palethorpe there, and the Congresswoman wants to keep abreast of what we're doing and is very anxious to help us as much as she can as we move forward. The airport hosted the Department of Natural Resources recently. Although we know fire is always a negative thing, firefighting is critical to protecting our natural resources. The airport was proud to host an aerial firefighting unit from the Washington Department of Natural Resources. And our strategic location allows them to deploy very quickly to the various sites across the state with wildfires. So we were happy to have them come and use our facilities. In addition, out at the airport, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, is doing a solar research project at our airport. It's, whoops, sorry, on page. These are new solar powered airfield lights, and they are doing research to see their effectiveness, and the research will extend through the fall of next year of 2025. And we're happy to support this kind of a project that's looked at developing environmentally friendly airfield lighting equipment. And then we've been doing in our various social media posts some tenant highlights, just to kind of share tenants who are occupying some of our port properties and who we're proud to partner with. And the tenant highlight for this month was Anthony's. Anthony's has two facilities on port property, Anthony's Home Port and then Anthony's Hardwire. Anthony's Home Port has been there since 1997, 27 years now. It provides $96,000 plus dollars to the port in annual revenue, and then it though has sales of $3.978 million annually. Hardwire Grill began occupying that port property in 2005. They've been there for 19 years. The annual rent to the port is $63,230 because they have a much smaller footprint, but they do booming annual sales of $4.111 million. So we'll just continue to spotlight some of our tenants as we go through the year. Also wanted to give a big shout out to our maintenance team. They did striping along Marine Drive, and thank you to, this is for the bicycle lane. The lane had faded out there on Marine Drive, and thanks to the cyclists who pointed this out to us. We had planned to redo striping when we redid the pavement and thought that would be a project that would happen this year, but the project got delayed. And so we went out and went ahead and redid the striping. All right, and then community engagement. Let's see. We hosted our monthly public marine terminal tour. Special thanks to Weyerhaeuser for participating and discussing their operations out on the marine terminal. The public tours are held on the first Tuesday of each month through October, and the next one will be September 3rd at 11 a.m. If you want to join us, please email us at tours@portolympia.com. The middle photo shows John Wolf, who is giving a presentation to the Olympia Rotary on the progress of the Bud Inlet cleanup. There was a good audience there who asked great questions, and we were excited to share that information. And then on the right was the Music at the Plaza. So we sponsored that event with our partners, the Olympia Downtown Alliance. And August event happenings. Here are some events that the port is either sponsoring or participating in or hosting. So there is Harbor Days are coming up, Labor Day weekend. On August 19th, there's a sort of, I guess it's an interpretive sign ceremony. It's sort of a ribbon cutting for the Billy Frank Jr. signs that are out on the Billy Frank Jr. Trail. We're doing movies at the marina. We're also supporting the South Sound Block Party. And we're also supporting the Summer Splash Gala at the Hands-On Children's Museum. And last but not least, we have lots of opportunities for you to provide your public comments and input. So please take advantage of those. Is it? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Executive Director Smith. Is there any questions or comments? No, all right, then let's move on to public comment. Individual public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Members of the public may comment on agenda items and other port business. Guidelines for public comment can be found in the commission rules and resolution 2022-09, Article 6. Comments should be directed to the commission as a whole and should not include comments about individual port staff or members of the public. All speakers shall be courteous in language and demeanor and shall confine remarks to those facts that are germane and relevant to the question or issue under discussion. So we have a couple of signed up here. Dwayne Kraus. Dwayne Kraus, you have the floor, sir.
Hello, this on, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for letting me come up and take this time. I appreciate it. My name is Dwayne Kraus. My wife and I have 2 slips at Swantown Marina. Very, very happy with everything there. We loved it. It's been great since we obtained the slip there last year. We had 1 slip. We bought a bigger boat and we obtained a 2nd slip. So now we maintain both. It was buying the bigger boat that unfortunately caused an issue for us. You always hear the negatives and I apologize for that. I'm an elected official myself, so I know you get all the negative and I apologize for that ahead of time. But so we obtained a 2nd slip. Everything was fine, moved the new boat in and come to find out several months after we obtained the 2nd slip, for whatever reason, they thought we vacated the 1st slip. And so we weren't getting charged for both, we were getting charged for 1. And it's just on a credit card that we get automatically billed. We don't review it really, it just, we pay the bill every month and it is what it is. I did get a phone call from the marina stating that, hey, we haven't been taking this payment out, so you owe this massive amount. And we're like, okay, well, we need to get this worked out. I was told I would get a call from, I'm trying to adhere to your rules about not naming individual staff members, but I was told I would be getting a phone call before anything would happen so we could work it out. No phone call, no phone call. I got another phone call saying, hey, we got to get this figured out. I said, I know, I'm waiting to hear from, waiting for this phone call. Never came. 2 days later, I get a phone call from my wife saying, we just got a massive charge on our credit card. I thought they weren't going to charge it until we talked this through. So yes, we owe the money 100%. It's not about the money. It's about the fact that a simple phone call to us to get this oversight on both counts. It was an oversight on our account because we didn't meticulously check our credit card statement before we, went on with life, but it was an oversight on their part as well that, we were getting the slip that we had for, I believe it was 4 months, never got charged for. And then all of a sudden we get this massive charge. So when that happened, I to this day, I've been fighting and fighting and fighting to try to get a phone call from the responsible party. And I cannot get any resolution. I did have email correspondence with this individual's superior. Which went very, very positively. You know, at first it had a different tone and then it went positively. But again, it goes back to the person at hand to this moment. So. Thank you very much. I'm open for any questions or anything anybody has. I just would hope for more accountability from people where it doesn't just get slammed onto my credit card all at once. Thank you.
I'm sure someone will be in touch. Next up is Doug Griffith.
Thank you, commissioners. And actually, it's Greg, not Doug.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. So I know I have 3 minutes, so this is like the track and field event at the Olympics. So I'll try to get all I want to say in 3 minutes, but might go longer. Anyway, again, my name is Greg Griffith, and I have been before you before, and as well as the Citizens Advisory Committee, to talk about my efforts to list the KGY building on the National Register of Historic Places. I just want to report to you that the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation met this past Friday. And I want to acknowledge that your staff members, Warren Henderson and Neil, were there, and I appreciate them spending their time to be there. And Warren did make some comments on the nomination to the Advisory Council. But moving forward, though, that the commission did, or the council did make a recommendation to forward the nomination of KGY to National Register, and that would go from the State Historic Preservation Officer, Allison Brooks, to the keeper of the National Register at the National Park Service. So that will be forthcoming. My goal in doing this and making this nomination of KGY is simply to make sure that the port staff and port commissioners are aware of the resources that it manages as being historically and architecturally important. And so the National Register is, as I've mentioned before to you, doesn't provide absolute protections. It is an honorary recognition. So that means that you are free to do what you want to with the building at any point. That said, the National Register is to provide you with information that these are important resources that are worthy of recognition and acknowledgement and preservation. I also know that when Mr. Hendrickson was at the council meeting, that he mentioned the fact that that the port was undertaking this study of the building structural integrity. And I don't know if that's been completed yet or if you've seen it yet, but I know it'll be of no surprise to me or probably anyone else to know that there are problems with the decking and the co-compliance with the railings and the pilings and so forth. But what I want to say to you is all buildings of any age need repair and maintenance. And for 63 years, this building has been on the marine waterfront and has survived that long. And I think that these deficiencies are not a reason to demolish the building. So I guess my message to you is that as you move forward with the future of the building, that you keep an open mind about it, that do not see it as but let me finish up by saying that please see this as an opportunity for you to give back to the community and preserve for the community a resource that is important for its historical architectural significance and has had this presence, a high profile presence in the community for 64 years and 100 years as a radio station. So that's my message to you, is to please keep in mind that significance. And as you move forward with planning for the waterfront, to keep in mind the importance of.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Next on the list is Carla Wolfsberg. Wolfsberg, you have the floor.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is Carla Wolfsberg. I live in Tumwater. And first, I'd like to just thank you for that Newport blog because I got to read this wonderful article about the master planning efforts on the peninsula, which is a lot of good detail. Talks about long-term a comprehensive plan that's going to follow, and that's really great. And it was encouraging to read about the attention to environmental concerns and assessments on the Port Peninsula too. So thank you for that. That's really good work. When I think of long-term planning, I think we all know that it's really important and it's really critical. But very long-term planning does require a shift in our focus, perhaps. And the Port Peninsula, and this would be a long-term planning on the Port Peninsula. And I just want to talk about whether or not the Port Peninsula can support a built environment. A shift in focus may require considering the most important public amenity as the natural environment and not the built environment. And perhaps the shoreline habitat restoration might be more of a public amenity and attraction than a series of buildings. And I just don't know if that's been really considered. So the built environment has value too, of course, but is a building what people most want to enjoy on the Port Peninsula with all the views and the beauty that's out there? Today, some may say yes, but not all. I've read quite a few public comments that you've received, as many as a member of your staff had time to send me, in which people ask you to cancel or put the Waterfront Center project on hold or simply not do it at all. And people repeatedly ask for a town hall, which I guess you plan to provide sometime in October. But I'm just wondering, why not provide sooner so that you really get a chance to hear from the public before all the processing, before all the work has been done? And hearing from people now makes more sense to me than using the desires of the community back in 2018. And that was the Vision 2050 was created. We've learned a lot since then. And I think it would be really to all of our advantage if you could reinitiate a program like that to gather more public input. And even Vision 2050, I know your public Ports Advisory Committee recently let you know that Vision 2050 was, in their opinion, a flawed report, and that another visioning project should be initiated by the port. So I've heard a staff member and members of this commission describe the Waterfront Center as a catalyst for creating destination waterfront. But what if our thinking shifts that the catalyst to the waterfront is the waterfront itself? And that in fact, the destination we all want to experience is the waterfront. So in conclusion, I just want to point out, I'll just say this really quickly, that you've all received from me, I hope, Brenda Snyder, her master's thesis that she wrote on the effect of sea level rise on the built environment in Olympia. That was done in 2010 for her master's thesis for her graduate degree from the University of California, Berkeley. It's a significant piece of work based on scientific projections, and she recommends we not build on the Port Peninsula, but build further south. So there's that to consider and take seriously. Thank you very much. And I encourage you to pause your planning on the Waterfront Center.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfsberg. Does anyone on Zoom want to make
Once he's on, he just got his hand raised a little while ago. So he's first, and I've got John Newman after him.
okay, Mr. Saison, you have the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I'm John Suzanne, and I'm a resident of Olympia. So tonight you're going to be asked to make a major decision with regard to approval of funding for the architectural center contract for the so-called Marine Center building. Commissioners, please vote no and delay approval of the architectural contract for the proposed center building for several reasons. First, a complete environmental assessment of the current conditions of the Port Peninsula should be initiated prior to any new building projects. This would include water quality, soil degradation, toxicity, and so on. This has not been done since the early 90s. Second, it is imprudent in my opinion, to go forward on an expensive building project on the Port Peninsula at this time, when the top priority for the port is the Butt Inlet cleanup effort, which is currently in its initial stage, and that we know will require enormous financial resources going forward. Also, while in process of developing a comprehensive plan for the Port Peninsula, why would we be going forward on a significant building project on the peninsula? This makes no sense. Please be responsible stewards of the public resources and vote no to this costly and environmentally dubious project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cezanne.
John Newman also wanted to speak.
Mr. Newman, you have the floor. See him anymore.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, this is Lee, and I guess thank you very much. I would like to second the comment that was just made. The Marine Terminal building that is going to be discussed tonight originally came from a grant from the Washington State dealing with mold in a building, a staff building for Port of Olympia workers. Now it is morphed into architectural design for Swantown, and essentially, as was said, this is the built environment. Vision 2050 that many of us participated in. That was during the pandemic. It was difficult times. Many of us spoke out that we wanted to preserve the isthmus for families to recreate in and not be covered with asphalt and concrete. And so now this issue of building, giving this money to an architectural firm is not well thought out. When we have the Butt Inlet cleanup, we're going to have the dredging spoils supposedly put on the isthmus and piled up, the toxic soils, the dredging soils put on top of the isthmus, and then the building put on top of it. Well, how can we have an architectural design if we haven't even decided where the toxic spoils are going to go on the isthmus? This is a backwards process. I hope you vote no tonight. And I think this is a very important issue. Many of us are not happy with going forward with this building. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reiner. Is there any other public comment this evening?
Don't see any other raised hands.
All right, we will move along then to our next agenda item, which is the consent calendar. We have 3 items on the consent calendar. The Port of Olympia Citizens Advisory Committee update, subcommittee formation, operating updates, resolution update. Camille St. Ange is the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Commission Affairs. The second item is the minutes from July 8th and July 15th. And then the third item is bills and vouchers for July 24, batches 23 through 26, with warrants over $200,000. There are 3 warrants over $200,000, one to U.S. Bank National Association for $5,227,556.41. And another to Dalton Olmsted Fugelband for $481,369.97, and one more to Dalton Olmsted and Fugelband for $560,263.56. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Calling for the vote. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, consent calendar is approved. Now, looking at our amended agenda this evening, we're going to the action calendar. which is number H2, and we're going to go to option to ground lease Fifth Amendment at the Newmarket Industrial Campus for Panattoni, and Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations, has some words for us.
Thank you, Commissioner. I defer now to Commissioner Harding.
Oh, would you like me to make my statement now?
Certainly.
Okay, perfect. Just as a refresher for the commission as well as the public, I do not vote on items regarding Panattoni. When I first took office, there were members of the community that asked for my removal from office, and the court did a formal investigation as to whether I had a conflict of interest. I do not have a conflict of interest. I actually learned that you would have to step down if you did have a conflict of interest. There's no method of recusing yourself. Because I am a shareholder in Kidder Matthews at a less than 1%, I would have a de minimis potential benefit based on the fact that some of my other colleagues do work with the Port of Olympia. And so I recuse myself from voting, but I wanted to clarify that for the public. I also just wanted to take like a little opportunity to say that as we're framing our role as commissioners, just not confusing expertise with conflict. And as we're looking at our business lines, having expertise in our different business lines can really help support the work that we're doing. And I appreciate that citizens want to keep us honest, and they should. So I think developers and real estate professionals are really necessary to building clean energy solutions, meeting our community's housing needs, and activating our industrial lands. So I will sit in the audience for this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, Commissioners. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations for Port of Olympia, here to discuss tonight the option to ground lease Fifth Amendment as an action item for your decision tonight. It involves the Panattoni Development Company at Newmarket Industrial Campus. Tonight is an action item with approval requested. I am pleased to introduce the Panattoni Development Management Team, who is physically present here tonight. That would be Len Syke and Brenda Fodge. So thank you for attending tonight. Glad you're here. This particular action item is related to the Habitat Conservation Plan at Olympia Regional Airport. It also involves the option to ground lease agreement, and it is an amendment to that 2020 agreement. And the advisory presentation on this topic was presented to the Commission on July 22nd. The option to ground lease agreement was originally executed in July of 2020. The legal entity is the acronym that you can see shown on the slide. It involves 199 acres in Newmarket Industrial Campus, designed and intended for use as a high-quality business park with mixed use of commercial, business, and light industrial. The lavender shaded areas show the extent of the 199 acres, essentially east of I-5, south of Tumwater Boulevard, and the vast majority is west of Center Street and north of 93rd. All but 29.27 acres at the present time is subject to the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan and its approval by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Those negotiations continue. The option agreement also includes a due diligence period for the developer to comprehensively evaluate the feasibility of developing the option premises in parcels of at least 10 acres. Individual parcels are expected to be developed over time, and the option term remains in effect through July of 2031. The completion of the HCP is a joint Port City of Tumwater responsibility. It is not a responsibility of the developer. The initial option to ground lease agreement anticipated completion within 24 months, i.e. 2022. Here we are 2 years later, and we're still not there with more work to do. We have incurred significant delays, and as a result, the most recent option agreement amendment did extend the HCP completion date through the end of this month, August 31st, 2024. A further extension, absent approval by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, is now required. Here is the entire history. I won't go through all the details. We have seen this before. Each of the items that is asterisk, however, I do want to call attention, are commission-approved steps in the process since 2020. This Fifth Amendment provides an additional 6-month extension to the habitat completion date. Amendments 2, 3, and 4 each extended it likewise. Amendment 4 also expected this date no later than August 31st. And the new amendment number 5 before you tonight will extend the due diligence. Actually, that's a correction. We have since corrected the draft document. Will extend only the HCP completion date to February 28th, 2025. The due diligence is part of that process. There was a previous, in the advisory section, we had talked about the development agreement as part of that draft amendment. That section has been removed. What you see in your packet tonight is therefore accurate in terms of what's being extended. What this amendment is not. The commission approval of this option to lease Fifth Amendment is not commission approval of a ground lease. That will be a separate action. The effect of this action will to extend the due diligence period to accommodate the HCP completion, and all future amendments and ground leases under this option agreement will be subject to separate commission actions at the appropriate time. Happy to take any questions or comments that you might have, and if you're prepared, the suggested motion is on the screen before you. Thank you.
The questions, comments?
I would just say that the deadline is coming up here to extend this, and in keeping faith with our partners of City of Tumwater and Panattoni, I think it's important that we go through with this extension and wait for the HCP completion.
Would accept a motion if somebody wanted to make one.
I authorize the executive director to execute option to ground lease Fifth Amendment, extending the due diligence and HCP completion dates to February 28th, 2025.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to authorize the executive director to execute option to ground lease Fifth Amendment, extending the due diligence and HCP completion dates to February 28th, 2025. Is there any further discussion? Questions?
I have discussion.
Sure.
I will be voting in support of this amendment in order to effectuate our port's commitment, the commitment of the previous port to this Panattoni lease, option to lease, and sort of the good faith efforts of honoring those previous commitments. I do want to say that I hope that as Panattoni continues to work with our current port administration, we can seek to recover some of the community benefits that the community had envisioned. The port is the largest landowner in Tumwater. The city of Tumwater has limited lands. And so the desires that this property not cut off community, but actually have some continuity with community spaces, I think is an important one. So I'm hoping there'll be an opportunity that will emerge to revisit some of those. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comment, questions? All right, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. We have a motion and a second to authorize the executive director to execute option to ground lease Fifth Amendment, extending the due diligence and HCP completion dates to February 28th, 2025. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. And we have a 4 vote because Commissioner Harding accused herself from this conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate it.
Thanks to the Panattoni folks who came today. You didn't have to sit for 3 hours. Okay, moving on. Now we'll jump into our pending issues or business. And the first up in this section is the Timberland Regional Library Workforce Development and Program Updates. Camille St. Ange, you have the floor.
Good evening, commissioners. I just want to introduce our guest this evening, Cheryl Hayward, who is the executive director of the Timberland Regional Library. And she's going to be presenting on their core work and some workforce updates for you. And I do want to note that the library, the Timberland Library, is a tenant of the Port of Olympia. And Cheryl.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners, and thank you for this opportunity to share some of our core services and, of course, some of the exciting things that are going on at Timberland Regional Library. So vibrant, interactive, fun, and community focused are words library patrons and we use to describe our services, programs, and collections our staff introduced in recent years. Timberland is in its 5th and final year of our 2020 to 2024 strategic direction, and I'm here this evening to share information about the core services and some of the highlights. Timberland Regional Library is a junior taxing district. We are government. We are fund government. And we are a public library district, an inter-county rural library district in RCW 27.12 that defines us as multi-county serving 550,000 people in Thurston, Mason, Lewis, Grace Harbor, and Pacific counties. Our mission, so what you see up here is an Adobe presentation. And this is a photo of the Westport Timberland Library, most recently what we call refresh with new flooring and new paint and new furniture, new layout and new play structure that happened 2 to 3 weeks ago. The mission of Timberland Regional Library is welcoming everyone to a vibrant world of possibilities, connecting people, places, and ideas, and evolving to meet the needs of our communities. And boy, have we evolved since 2020. Our vision is libraries connecting to our communities, and our values are access for all, working together, diverse communities and ideas, and responsible use of public resources. This particular specific strategic direction, we're focusing on local communities, EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, and birth to 5. So a couple of the core services we provide. So we encourage you to get a library card. It's free to anyone of any age who lives or works or attends school in all the 5 counties I just mentioned, as well as institutions, businesses, and homeschoolers. Library cards are good at all the 29 libraries. So visit the 29 libraries. They're in the 5 counties I mentioned. You'll get to know the 200 plus staff. We have about 260 staff. Our projected revenues this year are 27.2 million. We are, like I mentioned, a junior taxing district where we can tax up to 50 cents per 1,000 of the property, and we are at 23 cents. So if we were fully funded, we'd be over 50 million, and that would take a vote of the people, which we are not doing at this moment. So I wanted to mention that we also have 7 libraries in Thurston County: Hawks Prairie, Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater, West Olympia, Capitol Mall, Tenino, and Yelm libraries. There are hundreds of programs currently going on for their summer library program for people of all ages at all of our libraries and online as well. For $44 a month, people get free printing, both black and white and color, which is really, really important for our most rural of libraries because they don't have that service. And we also provide free scanning and faxing services. We encourage you to go out to a local story trail and check out deconstructed picture books based on the environment throughout our 5-county region. We encourage you to get the Libby app to access ebooks, e-audiobooks, and over 4,000 e-magazines. We were, for the 2nd year in a row, our readers in this region checked out 1.5 million digital items in 2023. We are one of the top 55 public library systems in the world in total digital circulation. Also, we have a collection called Library of Things, and I can scroll through this, and this is meant to, this Adobe presentation is meant to encourage you to look more deeply at what we offer. There's links live to the website, as well as links to videos to more deeply explain what we offer. We do offer a growing collection of Library of Things, such as fishing rods and tackle boxes to check out, birding backpacks, Discover passes, environmental backpacks, stargazing backpacks, whole bunch of different backpacks. Most recently, we have added blood pressure monitoring kits. The American Heart Association approached us regarding those kits. We have a gadget library with a grant from the Department of Ecology for about $70,000 through Lewis County Recyclers. And we have just introduced the John McCoy Since Time Immemorial Early Learning Kits, exploring Native American cultures of local tribes. This is for preschoolers, and we partnered with the Quinault tribe and hope to partner with the Nisqually Indian tribe as well. We encourage you to sign up for expanded access hours. So this is something that our users have asked for many, many years. We want hours in the morning, we want hours in the evening, we want hours on Sundays. And so like you, we live within a limited budget. And so we did this pilot in 2019, and here we are in 2024 with 11 of our 29 libraries that offer expanded access hours. So if you are 14 years of age and older, you can request a key card. You swipe in to get into that library when the staff are not there. That's 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, including Sundays and holidays. This has in many instances tripled the number of access hours that people have in our local communities. So these are libraries that include Tenino, Packwood, Salcombe, McCleary, Elma, Westport, Amanda Park, Hoodsport, Ocean Park, Ilwaco, and Nassau libraries. That means you have one key card and you can get into that library all the same hours, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, including Sunday and holidays. Highlights from 2023 include we launched mobile services. We went back to the past to go into the future, and we now offer Anywhere Library mobile services. It was first launched in Thurston County last year, and we go to the Senior Center of Rainier, we go to Cielo, we go to Rochester United Methodist Church, we go to Little Rock Methodist Church, just to name a few. All of those visits are on the website at trl.org. We now have it up and running with one person in each one of our counties with a van, reaching people, hundreds if not thousands of people who cannot make it to the 29 libraries. And then last year, we also launched our new website, and it's translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, Korean, and Chinese. Highlights of this year include strategic planning right now, 2025 to 2029. We hope to have our board approve our strategic direction later this year. So if you go to trl.org, the survey is there in Spanish, English, Korean, and Vietnamese. Wanted to mention that we just launched our first podcast called the No Shh TRL podcast. And so you could learn more about, it's a bit edgy for public libraries, so you might want to go check that out. We are in the process of building the new Mountain View Library in Randall. This is our first library in being built since the late 1990s. We're paying for it all by ourselves, a little bit over $2.1 million. And it's even before on time. It's going to be ready and open with a soft launch after Thanksgiving, 2 months ahead of schedule. And then I wanted to mention in terms of workforce development, I personally am a Pac Mountain board member. I lead the one-stop committee that oversees WorkSource. All 29 libraries are connection sites in the WorkSource system. So we are deeply integrated, not only physically with the buildings, but also on our website. There's a lot of information there and a lot of resources that people or companies or government is now reaching out to us. And so I want to mention that Medicine Creek Enterprise was the first one to say, yes, we need 960 library cards for our employees to access online resources from Timberland regarding staff development and training. Same thing with Thurston County is most likely going to say yes to 1,200 library cards. Mason County just said yes to 460 library cards. ESD 113 is saying yes to 500 library cards for their staff. So it's really cool to pick up one phone call and speak to one person and create that many library cards. Also wanted to mention, again, we're limited here on time, but everything is that I just talked about in greater detail is in here. All the photos in this presentation are local kids, local staff, et cetera, et cetera. Timberland Regional Library is a 21st century public library system, providing the latest in early literacy, welcoming spaces as a community hub for all, helping people with their job searching needs and their lifelong learning and entertainment interests. Timberland staff work with many local and regional community partners, serving on boards and coalitions and networks to move our region forward together. I encourage you to learn more about Timberland's wide array of services, programs, and resources, and to share what you learn with your family, friends, and communities. Please follow us on social media. We're on many, many different platforms, and sign up at trl.org for a monthly e-newsletter to stay informed of latest updates. And I would like to end with a quote, and thank you for your time. A library in the middle of a community is a cross between an emergency exit, a life raft, and a festival. They are cathedrals of the mind, hospitals of the soul, theme parks of the imagination. On a cold, rainy island, these 5 counties, they are the only sheltered public spaces where you are not a consumer, but a citizen instead. Thank you.
Is it possible to run to serve on the Timberland Public Library Commission?
Yes, and we have 2 representatives on the board right now for or actually we have one. Mary Beth Harrington is our president this year, and she represents Thurston. And we have just been informed of the Thurston County Commissioners have appointed the second person, and we're waiting for that to be completely confirmed with all 4 other counties. But yes, it's a 7-year commitment. Yes, because we're a 7-member board and we need to retain that knowledge. Yes, it's a great organization to be a part of.
Well, I think what Commissioner Vasavita is touching on is it's just so exciting.
It's very exciting.
Cheryl does such a good job of making it dynamic, and we had Matt Kennelly speak, and you two are such good leaders, and where you've taken your organization is so cool. Would you touch on the Lacey Makerspace? That's one of our partners, and the partnership you did there?
Yeah, so a lot of the things I just talked about come from staff, right? This is like a lot of it is staff generated. And the Lacey Makerspace was generated by staff in this area. So Tumwater, Lacey, Olympia, they got together, they talked to the Lacey Makerspace, they talked to the Friends of the Library groups in each one of the libraries, and they figured out a way to buy passes to go to the Lacey Makerspace so that people can check it out. And then because they can't afford it, and then go try out the Lacey Makerspace. So these are checking out the passes. And I'm so thrilled that the Friends groups are able to do that, because as government, we cannot gift public funds, so we couldn't do it. But the Friends are nonprofits and they can do that. So it's a win-win. We've also been partnering for over 20 years with the Hands-On Children's Museum. Again, they give us passes at all 29 libraries that we're able then to check out to people who cannot afford to go to the museum. So we have a lot of great partnerships throughout the region like that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, well, thank you for the invitation. Until next time.
Yes, thanks, Cheryl. Okay, the next item on the agenda is another briefing from the Port of Olympia Citizens Advisory Committee. This is the member update. Noel Hanson, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, and thanks for having us. Really quickly, I wanted to say a couple of things about Timberland Regional Library. One, you mentioned the Children's Museum, and I was able to attend the grand opening of their kids space in the Shelton Library. And if you've never been there, it's like a mini children's museum in the library, free for everybody all the time, and it's super, super cool. Incredible play structures built by Timberland Regional Library staff. It's really, really phenomenal. And then the $44 of free printing that everybody gets with your library card every month, super helpful when you get an enormously large packet for a meeting and you want to print some of it out. You just go to the library, print it out, and you save the toner in your own printer at home. Do it all the time. So anyway, thanks for having me. Appreciate putting us on the agenda as the Port of Olympia Citizens Advisory Committee. We look forward to being a regular part of your agenda monthly, hopefully, to give updates on what we're doing. Today, I'll keep it real short. The second thank you for authorizing the new subcommittees. We're really excited to get started with the Bud Inlet subcommittee and economic development subcommittee. And so our next month's update will be about getting those up and running and getting our schedule set for meetings moving forward. And then finally, just one last thing. We do have a couple of vacancies currently on the POCAC. And so we're not required to fill them. We can have anywhere from 9 to 17 members, but there are a couple of vacancies now. Our resolution as passed by the board says that the commission vice chair, the executive director, and myself will work to fill those vacancies. And so I look forward to working with the two of you and getting feedback from the commission on how we want to move forward doing that. If we want to fill them now, or if we want to wait and maybe fill them in the new year. We might have some additional vacancies at the end of the year as people age off of POCAC. So that's all for me for now. I promise to keep them short and sweet, and sometimes let the subcommittee chairs come and give you some information about the work they're doing. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Is any questions, comments?
Just one. We have heard from members of the public and also experienced ourselves how long some of our reports and other documents can be that support the work we're doing. And especially in the massive work on Bud Bay cleanup, Bud Inlet cleanup, and the waterfront development. I mean, these take time, like the 7-year terms of the Timberland Library members. I just want to invite you, the people who are serving on the POCAC, which I like to think of as the Community Advisory Committee instead of Citizens Advisory Committee. And by the way, if you'd ever want to come to us with that resolution, I'm interested. I like to invite them to come and communicate to us about the things they're diving deep into. And thank you for being a bridge to that. I really appreciate people taking that kind of time.
Yeah, I think I speak for all the members of the committee. When we're excited about increasing communication directly with the commission and being able to better serve the needs that you have in terms of transparency and communication with the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Moving on to the action calendar. We have one item left in the action calendar, contract approval, Waterfront Center architectural contract. James Summer, Capital Assets Program Manager. You have the floor, sir.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for having me. My name is James Summer. I am your Capital Assets Program Manager, and I am here tonight to talk to you about the Waterfront Center Architectural Contract Award. With me also online is Christopher Patano. He is the principal at EHDD, the architecture firm, so he is also available. So today's presentation is an action item. We are requesting approval. So as a reminder, I was before you on July 22nd as an advisory. Now, today, we're going to talk about the contract details and at the end have a motion for approval. So a little bit about the solicitation history. I won't go through all these, but in 2023, this project was an approved capital budget item. Early 2024, we went through the process of getting an architectural firm on board. In March, we notified EHD of their selection. At that point, we started scope negotiation. And also on May 6th, I was before you for a briefing on Destination Waterfront and this project. And then July, just last month, I was before you as an advisory item. And now I'm here tonight asking for action. So before we get into the contract details, I just want to acknowledge that this contract is very in-depth. It is a 64-page or approximately 64-page scope of work. I've tried to pull out the pertinent information to give you to the presentation. Otherwise, it would be a very, very long presentation. But that entire packet has been provided to you tonight in your meeting packet. And so again, just trying to pull out the pertinent details. Before I get started, I do want to address the master planning efforts that are going on. So if this contract is approved and move forward, EHDD will work to integrate into that process. So it will be part of the master planning as Destination Waterfront.
EHDD?
Yes, EHDD, that is the architectural firm. Also, we will align the geotechnical assessment, sea level rise, and bud inlet into this project. So it will be working in tandem. And then the environmental portion of that that is done for this project and the master planning will be shared. So this is folded into that master planning process. So I just wanted to start by addressing that. So this project is a three-phase approach. It allows for 2 natural breakpoints between phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 2 and phase 3. And we will get to that in future slides. It is based on the Washington State fee schedule. So as you see those fees, just know that it is based on a Washington State guideline. That guideline has also been provided to you in your packets tonight. So some of the assumptions we're working on, and these assumptions will get worked through as we go into phase 1. But as a starting point, we envision this to be a 3-story building, approximately 23,000 square foot of mixed use. Based on current energy code, we will be seeking LEED Silver or higher. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, which begins in the design phase. We are looking at an approximate budget of $17.5 million for the building. Again, as we work through the design, we'll get a better understanding, but that is kind of our initial assumption. And then also $2.5 million for the site and shoreline work. So as a reminder, this is not just the building. We will also be developing the land around that. And so that is also our assumption for now. So a little bit about the phases and their timelines. So phase 1 is approximately 8 weeks of effort. It includes a market analysis and pre-design and programming. Phase 2 is approximately 18 weeks of effort. It is the schematic design and design development. And phase 3 is approximately 23.5 months of effort, which includes the construction documents, the bidding, and the construction administration. So we will be getting to these phases, and I'll go through them a little bit more as we get through the slides. First, a little bit about the port and EHDD team. So as I mentioned, Christopher Patano is the principal in charge. He is with us tonight via Zoom. Lynn Rieselman is the marine science and aquarium expert. Brad Jacobson is the sustainability expert. Dan Leckman is a project architect. And Matt Fujimoto is the project manager and also a project architect. I wanted to highlight some of these members just to show the vast expertise that EHDD brings to this project. They have many other players on the bench should we need their expertise, and their full statement of qualifications has been provided in your packet tonight. In addition to them as the base team, we also have StructureCraft as our structural engineer and PAE Engineering as our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. On to specialty services. So also in this contract, we have a bunch of sub-consultants that will be to EHDD to provide value to this project. One is Cushman Wakefield, who will be performing the real estate market analysis to help us better understand the climate. In addition to that market analysis, we will also be passing along partners who have reached out privately with interest in being part of this project. So they will be folded into that market analysis. Moffitt Nickel is our civil engineering firm. If that sounds familiar, it is because they are involved in the master planning project, as well as Bud Inlet and some of the other projects here at the port. So they're very intimate with port and port operations. Groundswell is the landscape architecture firm. They have experience with EHDD and the Percival Landing project. So again, very familiar with the area. Haleen Aldrich is our geotechnical engineering. And essentially that is to help us understand the soils and what we are building on. And once we get reports from them, that'll help inform the design to make sure that we are designing a building for the soils. DCW is our cost management firm. They will be giving us cost estimating throughout the project, through the design, all the way through construction. This is to really help us understand the decisions we are making and what impact that has on the budget. So we can rein the project back in if it happens to go north. PAE Engineering, as I mentioned, are the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. But in addition, they will also be helping with technology design service, building performance and energy code. And EHDD, along with being the architect, will be helping with lead documentation and administration. So phase 1, as I mentioned, this project is built out in phases. And so I've tried to do the presentation tonight in those phases to help break them down. So we'll talk about deliverables we expect from each phase, the fee schedule, as well as the schedule for the project. So I also wanted to highlight before we get into phase 1 that this will be involvement with the commission. So some of the things we expect to bring to the commission and have input and brief about, some of the market analysis, different partnerships, our lead approach, the funding strategies, some of the different event spaces that we may be programming in, multi-use public amenities, and some of the green spaces. And this is how we intend to get that information to you. We will have work sessions, we will have regular meetings, we'll have the executive director weekly updates, as well as one-on-one meetings. And as it's titled, the cycle of commission inclusion, we expect this to go on throughout the duration of the project to make sure that you stay informed and are heard. So into phase 1. So this is the deliverables for phase 1. The beginning is the market analysis. There are lots of components to that, but the two I wanted to highlight is the highest and best use study, as well as the demand segment analysis that will come out of that. In tandem is the pre-design and programming. At the end of that, we expect to have a report come out. Some of the key parts of the report is the building and site program. So that's really defining what do we want this building to look like internally and how do we want it to function, as well as the site program. How do we want the surrounding spaces around this building to function? How can we bring public benefit to this and get people to invite down to the water to enjoy this space? So that is part of the consideration for this project. We'll also have initial project goals and criteria. Again, so what do we want to accomplish with this project? We'll document that, and that'll all be part of that report. And that will really help guide us as we go through the design. We can keep going back to those criteria. Are we hitting these benchmarks? Are we meeting our goals? And it can kind of act as a North Star for the design. And at the end, after we've made some of these initial decisions and our benchmarks, this will also help us identify grant and funding opportunities based on those decisions that we've made. So pretty important phase. Here is an example schedule. Again, this is just an example. Should this contract move forward, we will work with our consultant to finalize a schedule. The top 4 lines with the gray X's, that's kind of our internal technical meetings. But the ones I want to really highlight is the yellow, which is the commission design meetings, and the orange, which is the community meetings. So these are really touch points with the commission and with the community for their involvement. And these are ones that are led by our consultant. However, we are not limited to just these meetings, but these are the ones that are consultant driven and part of this contract. And then the phase 1 fee structure. I've broken them out based on the scopes of work, and the total comes in just shy of $129,000 for phase 1. And so after phase 1 would be one of those natural breakpoints that I discussed, talk about the market analysis, where we're at, and then move into phase 2. Phase 2 is the schematic design and design development. And really the goal of this phase is to be what the term would be shovel ready. And what that means is enough engineering and design has gone into this project that at the end of this phase, we can easily move into the construction phase with minimal disruption in time. Part of the advantage of being shovel ready is now we have something we can take out when we are looking for funding. We can take it to legislator and partners, and it's no longer, well, we might do this. We now have something we can show them and say, this is what we're trying to get you to buy into. This is the vision that we have. So that's really the goal at the end of phase 2. So some of the deliverables we expect at phase 2A, so schematic design, we expect to have 100% schematic design drawings, some project renderings. We'll have a report summarizing all those sustainability design criteria that we have discussed. We'll have content for and conduct the public open house or houses. We'll have a draft geotechnical engineering design report to help us inform the structural design as we move forward. And again, we'll have the probable construction costs based on those decisions that tell us, here's what we think this is going to cost to build. The purpose of this phase is really to establish the overall concept and design intent. The level of detail is really generic layout, basic forms, and conceptual drawings. Here is an example schedule. Again, just an example, but we will build this out. The first 4 are the technical in-house meetings. But again, the yellow commission design meetings, it gives us 4 touch points with the commission, as well as 2 touch points with the community to be involved in this process. Some of the deliverables we expect in phase 2B or the design development. We expect to start looking at lead credit review and document preparation. We'll have the 100% design drawings. We'll have as needed technical expertise in the form of memorandums. So that's as we need them in through the design. We'll have a final geotechnical engineering design report, probable construction cost updated now that we've gone through design development, as well as we'll start looking at grant writing to secure funding. So the purpose of this phase is really to further refine what we've done in schematic design. And as far as level of detail, not only are we seeing now floor plans, but we can start seeing elevation drawings, what it might look like from the outside, how it folds into the site plan itself. And then an example schedule. Again, programmed in is another community meeting touch point to make sure that we are involving the community in this process. So phase 2 is quite a bit larger than phase 1. There's a lot of work that goes into this. This is where we're actually starting the design of the building and the surround. So I've split it up into phase 2A, the schematic design. It comes in just north of $404,000. And phase 2B, which is the design development, just north of $493,000. And again, it's broken out by scope, but those are the totals for those 2 phases, or well, those 2 portions of phase 2. As I mentioned, 2 natural breakpoints between phase 2 and phase 3 is a natural breakpoint. Now we have a product that we can go out and start looking for funding. So some of the funding opportunities that we see or will be going after is grants, different appropriations, hopefully some private investment and partnerships. And should the commission decide
And bonding is also an option. Phase 3. This is the finalizing of the design. So that'll be the construction document, the bidding, and the construction administration, which is where we start building the building. So we really lean on our consultants' expertise in this phase. This is a very technical phase through the design, as well as once we start the actual construction. So some of the deliverables. For the construction documents, we expect a 90% construction drawing set. This is called the permit set. And it's called that because this is the set we will turn in for a permit. Once we get all of the feedback for that set, we will turn it into the 100% construction document drawing, or the bid set. The bid set is what we will actually use to go out to bid. And that will incorporate any of the feedback from the authority having jurisdiction. It'll have full specifications. So the drawings tell you what you're going to build. The specifications are the rule book on how you get there, as well as a full cost estimate now that the design has been completed. The bidding phase, we will have our consultants assist the general contractor with the bid conference. They will be responsible to request for information. So sometimes that's either something that was omitted in the design that is not clear, or maybe it's just something that needs clarification. So again, that's a very technical part. They will be helping to respond to those. And at the end, we'll have a conformed set of drawings. So we take all the design we've done, all the feedback, all the comments, incorporate it into a conformed set, and that is the final set of drawings. And then we go on to construction administration. This is where we actually start to build the building. So not listed here, but worth noting is approximately 78 weekly meetings between the owner, the architect, and the contractor. So the consultants are heavily involved here to steer that ship and make sure that this phase goes smoothly. They will also be doing site visits and reports, checking in on the progress, making sure it is being built per the design. They'll be involved in submittal reviews. So again, any equipment that gets submitted or any substitutions, they will help us review those. They'll review and respond to any additional requests for information. They'll review and respond to contractor punch list and back check. So the punch list is if it does not go as designed, it goes up onto a list and it must be corrected by the contractor. They will help us track those deficiencies as well as back checking them to make sure they are addressed. And at the very end, we will have record drawings to show what we did. Phase 3 is broken out by Phase 3A construction documents. Again, this is the finalizing of the design. Really, the purpose of this is to show all of the systems, how they interact together. So this is the very fine detail. This pipe goes here, this duct goes here, this electrical is ran to here. And so it is a pretty involved process, but again, it gives you the final design and, is constructible at that point. The total for that phase is just north of $633,000. And Phase 3B, this is when we begin to bid and actually build the project. And that comes in just shy of $579,000. So just a contract recap. I've thrown a lot of numbers around as well as durations. So I wanted to summarize them here on one screen. The total contract to go from programming through construction administration is approximately $2,239,076. That equates to 118 weeks worth of effort. So if we started today and went all the way through, in 118 weeks, we would be through. We understand that there will likely be breaks, as I mentioned, through Phase 1 and Phase 2. So this is not to say this building will be complete if you approve this contract 118 weeks. But again, this is just to showcase the amount of effort that goes into that contract value. And also, I just want to call out that this is not a guarantee of spending funds. Should you decide to approve this contract today, does not lock us in to the contract full amount. This does come before you annually under the capital budget for approval for funding. So although we will have a contract approval, we still have to come to you for funding for this project. And the contract will be structured such that if we decide to walk away at any of the phases, we can do that and we are not on the hook to continue on. So should we assess through either the master planning or environmental that it does not make sense to move forward, you will still have that opportunity to do so. So we brought two options for commission action before you tonight. Option A is to approve the port contract for only the first two phases for not to exceed amount of $1,026,636. The pro is that it limits upfront commitment to this project.
Some of the cons are that it does risk cost increase past phase 2, should we have to come back for an amendment for that. It also does put a bit of a risk for grant funding support. As I mentioned, between phase 2 and phase 3 is really where we're going to be looking at grants and funding opportunities. So to not have our consultants on board for that phase does put us at a little bit of risk without their expertise. And then there's also some risk to the project schedule by not locking down the team for the duration of this project. And option B is to approve the port contract for all phases as presented for not to exceed amount of $2,239,076. Some pros, it does secure the consultant team throughout the project. A project of this magnitude and complexity really is beneficial to have the whole team on board the entire duration. It gives us a more controlled project schedule because we will have those firms and sub-consultants on board. More predictable cost projections, again, because we'll have this contract in place. It's much easier for us to estimate the total project costs. And probably the most critical is the support between phase 2 and phase 3. As we go out for funding for this project, as I mentioned, that the expertise of EHDD and their subs is wonderful. So to have them on board to help us with that, I think is a wonderful pro for this project. And cons, I hate to type it up there. I couldn't find any of any consequence. If you go back to option A, it was a pro was to limit the upfront commitment. So maybe the cons could have been that you are committing to the entire contract. However, as I mentioned, the way this contract is structured, you can stop this project throughout the phases and walk away. So I had none of any consequences. So that's what I put. So at this point in time, I would open it up to any questions and comments for either myself or Chris online. And then we also provided 2 suggested motions for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any questions or comments? Commission?
I have some questions.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I think I've been consistent in some of my comments since the beginning when Commissioner Aiel and Commissioner Downing and I voted on this way back when. It's just concerns about the cost. So can you answer a couple questions? The $20 million, which was 17.5 for the building and 2.5 for the site, that does not include the 2.2 for the planning, correct? So that's in addition.
Yes, that is correct.
And then on the slide for 2A, you said there's going to be, I tried to save my questions to the end. Some of my fellow commissioners were talking about how that might help you guys with your presentations. I think it will. You said 4 project renderings. So is the idea that there would be sort of these different ideas and then you would get feedback as to how to proceed?
Absolutely. So because we're early on in the design phase, the building could look any which way we want. So the architect will help us by giving us kind of 4 different project renderings. And then as a team, we can decide, these are the ones we want to focus in on. And then we start building out the design based on that. But it really helps to have those renderings because visually it's a lot easier to imagine what this building will look like finished if we have those renderings. So yes, it'll help us finalize kind of the route we want to take. And then as we go through the design process, we'll really hone that in.
Okay. I totally appreciate what you're saying about this is a not to exceed contract and us being able to, pull in the reins at any point. My biggest concern is this is a almost $1,000 a square foot building. If we triangulate what rental rates are going to need to be on the spaces, we're just beyond the market. So at the beginning, my comments were with my private sector hat, this just makes no sense, right? But with my public sector hat, I've been educated as to this being a catalyst project, and I'm expanding my view of that. I think for me, really the real estate market analysis and really having commitments from some of these partners that we're looking at site co-locating with would be critical before we spend additional money on planning. So that is not to say that we can't vote on this contract. And then that would be my comment is without further understanding of whether we're planning on subsidizing the rents by half, maybe, whether we have tenants in place who are willing to commit to the square footages, and if so, how much and at what rate. I don't think we should continue with planning efforts without firming some of that up. I think that everything that you have laid out makes total sense. That to me is just question number one. And it hasn't happened yet because it's the first step of the plan. So you've laid that out as step number one. We really need a clear answer to that question, because with my private sector hat, it's a little unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So as you mentioned, the market analysis, that is the very first step. Should this contract be approved and move forward, we will begin on the market analysis immediately. And then we will bring that forward to you. As far as the cost for the building, right now, that's just an assumption. We don't have a cost estimating firm on board yet, but should this contract move forward, they will help us to hone that number in. Because as I mentioned, this is just an assumption based on our initial thoughts of this building. That could be wildly off. But this is kind of our, before we've done any programming, any market analysis, this is what we're thinking ballpark. We want to try and be as transparent as possible what it could cost, but it's very potential that it could be less, it could be more. We may be able to secure funding through appropriations and grants based on the design that make our portion significantly less. But we don't want to have sticker shock later, so we want to just be as transparent as we can.
So based on your comments, I don't disagree with you that there's not really a benefit to breaking what you've presented up into two phases. For me, phase one is really the market analysis. And if the staff is clear that we can't move forward until that's complete and everyone has clarity on that, then approving the contract in full is reasonable. Continuing with planning when we don't have any idea who's going to go into the space and how we're going to pay for it, and really fully understanding delivery condition and tenant improvement expectations, because that's something in our market that is unique, just and given the cost. The only other two comments that I had two commissioners reach out to me at the commissioner seminar, saying challenges they had had with LEED certification on projects. One of the things I appreciate about this commission is really interested in real environmental solutions. And so just asking the question whether that is the best use of funds to make the greatest environmental impact, it very well may be. But if it is a performative, mired in process thing, and there might be more meaningful ways we could utilize that money for environmental benefit, just question mark. And then as far as public benefit, I really think some sort of community survey, we talked about this as far as our destination waterfront and Vision 2050, and really pinpointing questions for a community survey, especially around public spaces and amenities, really early on. And just kind of, we had spoken about some of our other real estate, just of including it in RFPs, but a both and approach of what the community wants to see. So I think that's all in my chicken scratch.
Okay. If I address your comments real quick. So
Yep.
the LEED portion, my background is in mechanical engineering in the built environment. So I'm very familiar with the LEED certification process. I used to help building owners go through that, as well as EHDD, and as part of the energy code, and hopefully Chris corrects me if I'm misspeaking here, it is a requirement to be at least LEED silver going forward with a new building. So
The new energy code requires LEED silver for all new buildings.
I believe so, over a certain benchmark. Chris, if you're online, could you confirm or tell me?
You are correct. And public buildings first and foremost.
And the second, the community involvement. I fully understand that the community wants to be involved in this process, and I want them to be involved in it too. So I can work with EHD to make sure that that process starts early, and so that the community doesn't feel like we're just coming to them with a finished product and saying, here, what are your thoughts? Hopefully we can get them involved early, get their buy-in, especially with the community spaces. Because again, part of this project is transforming the waterfront to allow for the public to come down and use it. So certainly we don't want to do something the community doesn't want.
Yeah, and this, in my work with our unhoused community, someone told me that people don't want to offer you their opinion, they want you to implement their opinion. And I think just being really thoughtful about how we craft the questions so that we can deliver on what is your priority, a kayak launch or a swimming launch, and then we can really figure out what we can deliver on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Commissioner Vasavi.
Thank you. James, are you able to go to slide 15 from your presentation, the deliverables? Oh, that's not.
Or two more maybe.
I think it's labeled different. Okay, so I think I really appreciate having the expertise of someone with a real estate background to boil this down to the square foot, $1,000 a square foot reality, because for me, it kind of underscores the importance of having more than just an incredibly good project manager on our staff, but people with economic development and real estate backgrounds who can really help guide us to understand like what the vision is. So, which I'm very uncomfortable, as I've said before, outsourcing. A question for you I have though, I was trying to bring up a slide where I think it said that 2.5 million of it is for the shoreline improvements.
Site improvements.
Oh, for site and shoreline work. And I was curious to understand, you included a reference in the packet to the 2022 work that had been done by the Destination Waterfront Development Vision Committee, but by the previous consultants. And it showed the shoreline that let me step back. We're very fortunate in Olympia that we do have a publicly owned shoreline. And that's because a port district was created and the vast amount of our shoreline is owned by the port. So we have an opportunity to living shoreline, and we've effectuated that in small patches. Percival Landing has a living shoreline. North Point has a living shoreline, and Port Plaza developments we've done have some components of living shoreline. What I can't see in any of the things you shared for us here is whether we believe a living shoreline is possibly consistent with the site preparation at this site. And I would love to hear from the architect about that and about what this $2.5 million, would it be playing a role in that work?
Yeah, so I'll let Chris jump in. Before he does, I would say yes, nothing is off the table at this point when it comes to living shoreline. A lot of that will be addressed in phase one when we set our project goals. So that could be a site goal is, hey, this has to be a living shoreline. These are the kind of things that we want to be involved in this project. So phase one really is setting those goals so that as we go through, we make sure we're hitting those check marks. Some of the initial things that we talked about based on the destination waterfront visioning was maybe a public amphitheater, near the water, for a plaza, for lack of a better word. Living shoreline, somewhere where the access to the water is available to the public. Right now, it's not as inviting as it could be. And so we would look to really be transforming that shoreline, not only for sea level rise and protection of the Port Peninsula, but also to allow for the public to have better access. And Chris, I don't know if you want to comment further on that.
Yes, I'll jump in. Apologies for leaving my camera off. I don't want to crash my connection. So I'll go with what's working here. But yes, taking a step back, we typically break out our budgets where we have basically, when we talk about money for the building, that's basically everything from 5 feet into the building, right? So you draw a line around the building and you try to isolate the building costs within that line. And then you have the site work and the site development costs as a separate line item. And that's often a very, very important line item. If you just talk about building costs, you get a skewed idea of what you can build for. And then, of course, these shoreline sites, as you know, are extremely complicated. So everything that you're touching on is actually in play when we're talking about this site development and shoreline work. At this site, we know that the soils are poor, right? And we know that we have to deal with sea level rise. And we know that one of the ways that we can do that is through a living shoreline or raising that edge of the shore as we prepare the site. So we'll get into that with our consultant team and look at the options. But that is a very important factor, as well as stabilizing the soil to be able to support a building and bringing in the infrastructure, the services, water, electricity, areas for parking, of course, the landscape and waterfront amenities and other aspects. So that's what we're containing or trying to cover with that number. Does that help? Is there any other additional information I can provide?
Thank you. I guess it's helpful to know that anything is possible at this point and that the soil quality is poor. So that would be all I'd ask at this moment. I do have one last question before you move on, Mr. President. If you can pull up page 21 of the commission packet as it went out to people. Missy? That's the way the packets are organized. It has the bigger bird's eye view in the original planning by Thomas Architecture Studios that envisioned a living shoreline in certain places and different kinds of hardening along the way. And I really want to ask everyone to look at this visual because it shows how there has to be integration from one site to the next. And as I looked at this in preparation for this meeting, it did reinforce for me a desire. I am all for this project. I believe we should have a waterfront center. I believe it's consistent with public access to the waterfront. I believe it also can be economically consistent with doing what we need to at the waterfront. But it's very clear to me that we're not there yet as a team. And so I would like to slow this down a little bit. Can you pull up that slide? It's the way it gets posted for the public in the commission packet. But if you
Well,
can't-
while you're pulling that up, I'll just add that I'm very familiar with that diagram, and I think that it's a great example of showing how, just what you're saying, how this is an opportunity to integrate the whole site and the whole peninsula. And as James pointed out, we have consultants that are shared between the Bud Inlet cleanup, the master plan, and this project. And so our team is very focused and keen on how we can best utilize efforts in all three areas to stabilize the shoreline, deal with sea level rise, and make the appropriate moves in the appropriate places around the peninsula and in this site specifically. So that idea of teamwork and that idea of making sure that we're keeping all those options on the table is very baked into how we've put this team together and the consultants that we've brought to the.
Thank you, Mr. Basavita. Thank you, Missy. That was the one. Because the master planning, and I'd like to then let other commissioners just wrap up, but it seems like if we're master planning for the marina and we're doing this waterfront center first, I am a little worried about why. Originally, I believed it was because of a capital appropriation, but I'm sure we could get an extension to make sure this syncs up with our master planning. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And I will address the master planning timeline. I believe that we are expected to wrap up in spring of next year on the master planning ish timeframe. And so that will be complete before we are too far into the design on this. Just as a side note.
Ms. Sanders, any questions or comments?
I echo Commissioner Harding as well as our Vice President Basavita in their concerns. I know we just approved a large contract for market analysis and economic assessment regarding the evaluation of the properties on the Port Peninsula to develop a comprehensive long-term land use plan for destination waterfront. And so I'm just wondering how those two would overlap with this contract as well, because they're going to be looking at, long-term land use planning. And so that was just one of the concerns that I have is how is that, them looking into the whole Port Peninsula for longer term land use planning and how this fits in.
Yeah, so part of the master plan effort includes destination waterfront, which is what this document is from. And this project is just one project of destination waterfront. So this process will integrate into that master planning process. As Chris mentioned, we do have several consultants who are on both teams. And so these will go on in tandem. It will not be this project over here and then the master plan. We will really integrate those together along with having EHDD as part of some of those master planning meetings to make sure that it is seamless. And is exactly as you guys mentioned, that it is part of the process and not just some project that's gone rogue.
Commissioner Tong?
My question is to the format of these public meetings. For the first one, do you have any idea how it's going to go and how that feedback will be incorporated into the phase 2 design?
Chris, do you want to take that one?
Especially since it's at the end of phase 1, I guess is why I'm asking. So how we're going to incorporate that into the planning so quickly if we move into phase 2 there.
Yeah, is it possible to get that slide up?
Which one do you want?
If you go back to my presentation, I can put it on there.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I address the right phase because it's in a little bit different format than what I have.
I believe this is the schedule you're talking about. Is that correct, Commissioner?
Thank you.
And can you see the example schedule, Chris?
Yeah. So, okay. So, the pre-design and programming, as James had mentioned, we start to develop the program. We're working with the market analysis information. We also start to develop some ideas on some options. They're still at a very high level, but the option development is a key piece that leads into those renderings that James was mentioning. So given the schedule, we like to start to get those options in front of you as soon as they start to form. We can get input from the commission, typically some direction as well. And then we try to keep those options alive. So we're not selecting yet. We want to get to schematic design. But typically there'll be 2 or 3 concepts that we're keeping alive. And that then would be what would occur at that first community meeting where we would say, hey, this is the information we got from the market analysis. These were some of the, data inputs that we thought were relevant. We looked at the program and what could be potentially in the building and on the site. We started to develop, here's an option, here's a second option, here's a third option. Tell us what you think. And it's really part of the conversation, and it's really part about getting input and keeping these options open. There's a place in the process when we get into schematic design where we really drive moving from multiple options to a preferred option. But that is not in this phase 1. In this phase 1, it's about keeping concepts developing, keeping input coming in, and trying to make the ideas better as we're all learning more about the project and as the project starts to take shape. So does that answer it for you?
Yes, that does. Thank you, Christy. I think I would definitely be more comfortable if the community input was more front-loaded in this process. And I agree with Commissioner Salvador that I'd like to slow this down a little bit, be it start at phase 1 and check in again there, or postpone this and wait and see.
The one thing I would add to that is you get better conversation if we do some work and we bring ideas to the table. So I understand what you're saying is there's often this drive of let's get the community input up front, but you actually end up having more meaningful conversations and input when there are concepts to look at, and they're still very early concepts, but they're also built on data like the market analysis report and other programming information and decisions that we're making. So it's that, it's that chicken and egg, but we really believe that moving it down the process, moving along in the process a little bit before you open that up for community conversation actually provides for a more meaningful community meeting.
And I would also just echo that, once in phase 1, we haven't started actually designing the building and the site surround yet. That really starts in phase 2, the schematic design and design development. So at this point, it is very fluid. It's easy to change. And as Chris mentioned, just giving options to the community and say, these are ones we've thought through, based on destination waterfront, some of the early feedback. And then as well as the market analysis, these are things that we think this market will support.
and then getting feedback as well from that. But again, it's very fluid at this point and very easy to change. Should the community hate all of our ideas, you know, that we're not locked into those and we still can. Thank you.
Can I ask another question? What would be the impact to the process, whichever of you wants to answer this question, if we approved phase one, which is a small amount, I recognize, and then checked in again? Can you talk about the impacts to the timeline and the efficiencies?
Yeah, from the project management side, and I'll let Chris speak to the consultant side. I know the mobilization to get the team going. As I mentioned, we have a lot of consultants on this one that fall under the EHDD umbrella. And so getting them scheduled and locked in, make sure that they are available to us. And I'm not saying they are not. I'll let Chris weigh in on that side. But having that continuity really helps them to know that this project could potentially move forward through these phases, and then helps us control the schedule because we know that we have the contract for it. And Chris, I don't know if you want to talk to the consultant side.
Yeah, I'll just touch on it briefly. It's a good question, and really put your other hat on, like just like a planning, running a business hat. And, you know, we want to have the best people, the consultants with the most appropriate expertise work on your project. And that's who we have assigned to this project. So of course, if we can get our contract approved and we know that we're working on it, then we can take those people and we put them, you know, every firm puts them into their staffing plan and they say, okay, we've got them dedicated, they're working on this project. Understanding, and it's kind of a crazy thing about our business, understanding that most of our public clients at really any milestone can say, yeah, we've changed our mind and we're not going to do this project. But that's just a reality of the architecture and engineering consulting business. But taking that off the table, what it does is it allows us to staff your project appropriately and have, you know, the people that you want working on the project to get that value for what you're paying for their expertise. It allows them to be dedicated to your project. When projects get too piecemeal or too broken up, you know, we'll do the best we can. I mean, honestly, we want the right people working on the project, and we want to do a great job for you. But sometimes the best people get pulled away to, you know, bigger projects or projects that we know that they can work on for 6 months at a time. So that's a little behind the curtain peek of how that could impact your project.
And Executive Director Smith, given some of the concerns you're hearing from the commission just about some questions, wanting some additional information, would you, you can punt on this if you want, if I'm putting you too much on the spot, but would you advocate for us proceeding with approving this contract, or would you see taking a smaller piece as being, what would you see as the best from a building partnership and allowing business to move forward? But
yeah. I think rather than advocate a specific outcome, I will just say, I think something that we highlighted in the advisory, but I don't know that we necessarily highlighted here, is the port has the option of the contract to stop after any of the phases. So if we authorize the full contract, if after phase one we think this isn't going to work, or that this just isn't something we're ready to pursue right now, we have the ability to terminate the contract right then. Same thing after phase two. So I think it feels like it's sort of a safety net to do the full contract, but again, that's just an additional piece of information I'll lay out there for all.
And we haven't heard from Commissioner Ayala. What's your opinion?
Well, thank you. Well, it's I've been supportive of this project since the beginning, and I recognize and I understand the concerns that my fellow commissioners have, and they're certainly relevant and real concerns that we need to consider as we move along here. You know, from a perspective of what I do in my day job, I would look at this as we need to I would look at this and I would hope that we would make a commitment to this project, knowing that we can pull the pin at any time. That has actually happened to my organization, where we've been ready to break ground on a project, and the owner, for whatever reason, decides not to do the project. We can certainly do that as this commission, as anytime we want to do that. I think there's benefit in getting the team established. I know there's benefit in getting the team established early. And I appreciate everybody's concerns. We need to continue to consider those concerns as we move along. I think at this point, we don't have enough information to actually commit to putting up a building. But I also think we don't have enough information to not move forward with at this point. So that's where I'm at. So if we could move to that last page, if there's any other comments that anyone would like to make. Floor is open.
I'll just quickly add that the process that we've laid out here, and James, went through and explained very well in great detail. It's a process that, we talked about this when I met with you before. It does, it requires that commitment. Building is actually the ultimate, act of optimism, right? Like, it takes a lot to build a building, build a project. But that being said, this process and the team that you have in front of you, the team that's been assembled, this is a proven process that's successful with public waterfront projects. So it takes everybody to buy in, and there's a lot of work to be done. But through this process, I think the questions that I've heard come up from both the community and the commissioners, I know that those will be addressed as we move through the process. So thank you for letting me speak.
And on the note of the team, I did have another architect who submitted for this say, once he saw EHDD on the list, he said, well, we should just pull out now because they have such a proven track record of success. So that, I think there's a lot of respect for your ability to perform, Chris.
I would move to authorize the executive director to execute contract number 2024-1007 with EHDD Architecture for a not to exceed amount of $129,000 for phase one.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor a motion and a second to authorize the executive director to execute contract number 2024-1007 with EHDD Architecture for a not to exceed amount of $129,000 for phase one. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Understand that we can stop at any point, but I'd like to bring that back to the commission to stop at any point, so we can really take the public comment that we receive between now and then into account, as well as the real estate market analysis, what grants are available, and all the other details from phase one. Those deliverables are going to be very important.
Any other comments, questions?
I appreciate Commissioner Tong's approach and I support it. I think you heard from the commission months ago that we really wanted to see the market analysis early and to have it help inform kind of where we're going, not just external objective market analysis factors, but also the partners that you've potentially assembled. And I'm uncomfortable with repeatedly having process move forward without being briefed in where I feel like I do understand that vision. So I think Commissioner Tong's approach helps us start to gel around some shared vision, which is what I'm looking for before we go further down this path.
And my only comment would be, it's, at least speaking for myself, it's not the intent to bite-sized piece this entire process. We recognize you need to assemble the team and have certainty. Hopefully this one more step of additional information for the commission will get everyone comfortable so that we can engage with the larger contract.
Commissioner Sanders, anything?
No, I support, all of us.
Okay.
the best.
Okay. Okay, well, we have a motion and a second to authorize the executive director to execute contract number 2024-1007 with EHDD Architecture for a not to exceed amount of $129,000 for phase one of the project. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Chair, I can't remember what it's called, personal privilege. Could we
Yes,
just
we can take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Yes, of course we can.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We are back and we are ready to move on to action other calendar, but we have nothing there, so we'll move on to the advisory calendar. And the first item on the advisory calendar is surplus equipment approval. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations, here to speak to you tonight about surplus of port property process with regard to the Marine Terminal's mobile crane. I'm actually standing in tonight for Marine Terminal Senior Manager Afshin Humas, who's on leave. This is an advisory item. No action is required. The purpose of the presentation is to share with you that the port intends to surplus one mobile crane with your approval. And this is actually an advance authorization request. We normally don't handle surpluses in this line. Normally, we either have a piece of equipment or property that has served its purposes and it's time to dispose or give it to DES to put on the open market for sale. We actually don't have a buyer for the crane right now. However, the nature of this type of capital equipment is so sensitive to market conditions that somebody will have a broken crane and they need an immediate replacement. And if they called us today and said, we understand your crane is for sale, we'd like to buy it, we'd have to tell them it would be about 6.5 to 7 weeks before we could actually get back to you. So the intent of this is, in this process with an advisory and the action item next month, is to get your advance authorization to close a sale if a phone call is received. And then that way we can respond to immediately to the market conditions without the potential loss of that sale and return of revenue to the port. So the crane specifics, it's a Gottwald mobile crane out of the Netherlands. It was purchased in 2014 for $3.3 million. Unfortunately, the anticipated cargo that the crane was purchased to serve failed to materialize, and the crane has been infrequently used for 10 years. Unfortunately, as a result of that, additional staff time and maintenance expense burdens have been incurred to the port, and the crane really no longer serves port needs. As an example, the parts are now becoming a little bit harder to come by with a 10-year-old crane. They are hard to source, and there are certain levels of expertise that is required to service and maintain the crane. The net present value after depreciation is a little less than $2.6 million. However, given the age of the crane as well as the supply chain for supplying its parts, the current market value is significantly lower due to age and the limited parts availability. We will take a loss on this crane. That will, however, eliminate future negative impact on the Marine Terminal financial performance and will remove the depreciation expense from the ledger, as well as ensuring that the future M&O budget impacts on the Marine Terminal are reduced. As an example of that, just in the last 2 months, we had to repair the crane at a cost of $52,000 for a simple level of parts and just to keep the crane operable and functional should there be a need. That type of expense would continue until the crane was otherwise disposed of. The relevant guidance for the surplus process is governed by Port Resolution 2024-01. This is the first resolution that the Commission approves at the beginning of every year to define exactly how the surplus process would work. And it's also governed by RCW 53.08.090. In this particular case, this RCW has been amended for this particular biennium, and it actually put a dollar amount specific to that. The Commission approval of surplus is required by resolution when the personal property valuation exceeds $22,000. So I mentioned the current market value, or not the current book value, rather, is a little bit less than 2.6 million. And obviously our market value greatly exceeds 22,000. So next month, the action item to be brought to the Commission for approval will be to approve resolution 2024-XX. The number will be assigned at the time of the meeting. That draft resolution is a very simple one-page document that's part of your agenda packet for this evening. And it will also authorize the executive director to surplus and sell the port's Gottwald mobile crane serial number as shown when market demand exists for it. This action item will be brought to you not at the first meeting in September. I myself will be on leave, and Afshin that will be his first day back. So that would be a tough tough road to hoe for his first day back from leave to address a commission action item. So we will table this up and defer it until the second September regular commission meeting of September 23rd, 2024. And happy to entertain any questions or comments you might have.
Commissioner Tong, have anything?
No questions, thank you.
I'm like, yes.
Thank you for bringing this, and it seems like it's about additional dollars we won't lose, and I'm all for that.
And I think this just demonstrates this is a new day at the port with a new team, Option, as well as the rest of port staff looking at ways to improve our future. So we can't change the past, but we certainly can we can certainly change things as to where we're going. So
Excellent. Thank you. I'll step back for public comment.
Thank you. Yeah, so we can take up public comment on this topic now, the surplus equipment approval. Anyone online want to make public comment?
The name John Newman had a hand raised and then they lowered it. Now it's raised. So John Newman, who I think is Lee Reiner.
Right. Yeah, Ms. Reiner.
AKA.
I'm asking her to unmute.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, it is. Yeah, okay.
Good to hear you, commissioners. It's John Newman, resident for a long time. You know, I remember when they bought this crane after they got rid of the other cranes, and it was an example of the commission making kind of a snap judgment whenever they bought it 10 years ago. It's good to get rid of it, but I think it's a reminder to think about the future and decisions that will be made for investments for the port, and that we need to think about Thurston County and what will benefit residents of Thurston County for any more improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Any other public comment on the surplus equipment approval?
See no other raised hands.
All right, thank you very much. We will move on then to 2024 capital budget amendment, Marine Terminal Warehouse. Mr. Hendrickson, you have the floor again.
Thank you again, commissioners. Again, I'm standing in for Option UMass as Marine Terminal Senior Manager who's on leave tonight. The topic is the capital budget amendment to a Marine Terminal Warehouse, a new warehouse over and above our existing facility. This is an advisory item and no action is required this evening. The item before you is to approve an amendment to the 2024 capital budget to initiate design of and potentially procure advanced infrastructure for a new 50,000 square foot marine terminal warehouse. The warehouse is recognized as the marine terminal's most valuable asset. It is 76,000 square feet. It was built in 1983. It is located just 175 feet from the water line. No other Puget Sound port can offer anything remotely similar in terms of close proximity of dry storage immediately adjacent to our deep water berths. The photograph that you see there is the current supplies that are being stored in our warehouse now. That is the paper bulk product coming from Brazil via our customer Suzano. The warehouse capacity, as it turns out, as large as it is, has actually limited our port revenue potential. The demand for supporting Suzano bulk paper transloading warehouse operations exceeds our current capacity. Suzano would like to bring more ships more frequently with greater loads than they currently are now. Right now, they actually leave Brazil. There is a ship en route to Olympia now that is in just awaiting a berth in San Salvador. So it can unload part of its paper bulk cargo, then continue up here with the appropriate amount of cargo for our warehouse. They would like to go ahead and fill that ship up to a greater extent and be able to bring more paper bulk here with that ship if in fact we had the storage space and capacity in the terminal warehouse to go ahead and provide its capability. So as a result, The sooner we can provide this storage capability, the sooner we can generate significant additional revenue. And the additional capacity will also provide Suzano much improved economies of scale, because now they will require fewer ships to sail from Brazil around the south end of South America, all the way up the west coast of the Americas to here with larger cargo loads than they currently can. This is the proposed location for the new warehouse location. It is both, the warehouse will be both portable as well as expandable. And so the intention, you can see there, the relative size of that rectangle, the yellow rectangle is the proposed location. And we would start at the north end and build a 50,000 square foot warehouse. And if in fact demand continued to increase, given its modular and portable design, we could further increase it to the south. The request for initiating design and procure infrastructure before the end of the year is a $1 million addition to the 2024 capital budget. The source of that funds would be the existing reserve funds of the port, and up to additional 1.5 million may be required in 2025. Now, that is an exceptionally large number, and it is exceptionally conservatively driven. The current estimate for the warehouse development is $1.7 million. But I've added contingency funds on there intentionally. We are currently in the process of going through a design review process to determine exactly the soil types, the weight bearing capacity. This paper bulk material is incredibly dense. And so as a result, the quality of the soils on the Port Peninsula and the load bearing capability have to be measured. As it turns out, as I researched the history, this is not the first time a new warehouse has come before the Port Commission. It actually came before the Port Commission in 2013. We had all the engineering, all the design specs, the construction specs, and everything else. And at the moment when it came down to the Port Commission approving the investment, the choice was not to go forward. But the good news is we have all of that data, all that engineering data, the geotechnical data, which our consultants are now using to evaluate exactly what we have in that particular location on the port property to determine exactly what we would need to support this type of cargo going forward. So there is a benefit to the history that we have and the data that we still have in our files. The break-even period is estimated to be potentially 5 years. And where that number comes from is Commissioner Basavita did send me some questions earlier this year, and I was able to find some of that money and explain exactly how this was achieved. If we invest up to $2.5 million, the anticipated result is right now, Suzano in less than a year has already brought us 5 ships. If they bring us 5 ships a year, and this warehouse then can go ahead and provide the overflow to our existing storage capacity, we have a potential revenue of $100,000 per ship of revenue to the port. That's $500,000 per calendar year and a $2.5 million investment. That's a 20% rate of return. We break even on the warehouse in 5 years, and it comes out to $10 per square foot of revenue over that time. Now, will we get 5 ships a year? Will we use it? But if we don't have it for Suzano, we are not limited by building this warehouse to just a single customer. We have storage and break bulk capacity and storage capacity just less than 200 feet from the waterfront. And so if we aren't able to use the needs for Suzano or their supply chain should change, then we have this immediate revenue generating capability for anything else that we might be able to find. And Option has proven, as you are well aware, to be a master at finding new customers. The action item to be brought to the commission for approval will be to amend the 2024 capital budget to add $1 million for new marine terminal warehouse, and it will be planned for the regular commission meeting on September 23rd. Now, there are a few other questions too that came up with regard to just some data about the marine terminal that let me take a moment to explain a little bit about those. First off, what is the value of this warehouse in terms of its capability to our existing warehouse release in terms of the net revenue generation? So keep in mind that the current space and location on the marine terminal plan for this new warehouse today generates 0 revenue. You know, 0. When the cattle company came and delivered its cattle, there was a little hay storage there, which netted us a couple $100 a month in storage for excess hay. That was it. I mean, that's the only revenue generating potential. This will generate potentially $500,000 a year or $10 per square foot. The warehouse release, it's very difficult to compare apples to oranges because that is what this comparison is. Here's a situation where we own the building, we own the land, And the revenue generated is by the storage, the shipment, the fees, and everything else that goes into that, the net result and the outloading that takes place from that. So there's several components then that feed that revenue for the new warehouse that don't feed the revenue simply for a land lease for warehouse. But even given that, very simply, looking at the monthly lease rate to warehouse right now is a little over $24,000, or on a monthly basis, $292,000 on an annual basis. That's for 24.5 acres. That's over 1 million square feet. The bottom line is just the land lease alone produces 27 cents per square foot per year, where this warehouse potentially with 5 ships and $100,000 revenue would be producing revenue at the rate of $10 per square foot. Another question that came up was with regard to the value of shipping these products to Olympia with this warehouse as compared to other ports in Puget Sound or elsewhere. So there's 2 parts to this story. The first is that there is no other Puget Sound port that could compete with us for Suzano and their paper bulk. Our competitors are Longview and Columbia River ports and elsewhere, but nothing else in Puget Sound because we have this warehouse. That is our primary selling point, so close to the berth. And it minimizes the loading and unloading time, which directly translates into reduced expense for longshore labor, okay? So what we compare that to is shipping all the way to Olympia. What was the alternative? They were actually bringing the product on rail from the Gulf Coast on rail to their Pacific Northwest paper mills. And so diesel, rail, transmissions, and everything else, the cost of that, we were more cost competitive. And Suzano is also a very green company. This paper bulk, by the way, is sourced by eucalyptus. It's grown. And as a result, it's a recyclable product that they continue to turn over. Their ships are also as green as they can be, using everything from shore power, but shore power because that capability doesn't currently exist and isn't available. But we are looking at how we can incorporate that in the future. The end result is we provide them a seaborne alternative compared to shipping by diesel rail. The other thing that we offer by having the port here as another token of the efficiency is we actually are receiving inquiries from barge transport companies that they are finding that if we ship things to Olympia by barge and then put them on I-5 southbound, we're better off than trying to transit I-5 through Bellingham to Everett, through Seattle, through Tacoma on I-5, given the time, the congestion, the labor, and of course, the resultant emissions. So the end result is that doesn't necessarily affect this decision, but it does affect the fact that we do create a much greener alternative. And Option has a tremendous amount of detail on how the greenhouse emissions have been changed, how the emission standards have been changed over the last few years, and shipping has become significantly more environmentally friendly than it ever was. And it's only forecast to get better. So with that additional background, I offer questions and comments.
Landers, you want to start?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that information. I appreciate that they are very green. They're actually like carbon 0.0000 in Brazil where they come from. So I appreciate the background and the information on how it would support them as well as the square footage and you know the $10 per square foot, you know, bringing that forward, it really helps understand, you know, the potential of the economic benefit of a warehouse like that. So I appreciate that one. Thank you.
Commissioner Rosado?
Thank you, Director Hendrickson, for an excellent briefing. And I just have one question. It seems like this design would be the kind of warehouse, I don't know if you said portable, but or what the word was, that modular, so that it could be built in a location and moved.
Correct. And
that it had a 5-year projected rate of return. And that seems to me consistent with our ongoing efforts at master planning in terms of kind of long-term looking at the marine terminal and how it fits in with the other lands. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree, Commissioner. Thank you.
I would also agree. I think that this Option has been doing a great job of being creative at the marine terminal, and this supports him in his efforts. While allowing us to maintain flexibility as we reimagine our entire waterfront. And this is probably just my level of comfort, but a warehouse has just so many uses that if it wasn't being used with this particular client, we could use it for lots of other things. So I think it seems well thought out. It seems reasonably affordable in comparison to the other things that we're considering. Little wins.
Yeah, I've heard some discussion about Weyerhaeuser lately and their contract and some public comments, and there's even a petition circulating out there, I heard. So I think it's really important at this moment to look for public benefit and that option and other options like Aspen is looking for that not only are environmentally frugal, but $10 a square foot is a lot more than 27 cents, and we need to be looking towards that.
I appreciate everybody's comments. I'm just gonna say I would feel more comfortable if we actually had some type of commitment from Suzano. You know, I think this is, I understand that warehouse space is very valuable, and there it can be, we could use it for other things, but I think this is, even though it's a minor investment compared to some other things, it's still a significant amount of money. And you know, honestly, I'm used to when you get proposals like this, I'm used to seeing what exactly the revenues are we're expecting, and exactly what that rate of return and when that break-even point is. And we know that because of the commitments that we already have for the space. I'm not against another warehouse. I'm certainly, I think it's probably a good investment, but I mean, honestly, I just didn't see the numbers here verifying it, and without that real commitment, I'm just kind of questioning it at the point.
Understood. The financial numbers I used for the secondary warehouse were an extrapolation on the revenue that we derived from the current warehouse. So there's a direct correlation there. The other thing is I will share that Suzano, although not in writing, has certainly verbally committed that if you build that warehouse, we are going to bring you more product. We have proven our value to that company to the point that even their mills are also very interested in increasing their throughput, because the efficiency of we're so close to the mills that just-in-time inventory delivery is a huge benefit. And so we can provide that service. So I have great confidence in the potential, that we will use this warehouse to its maximum extent.
And Austin does have like significant numbers backing all of this up. I invited myself to the marine terminal, and then, so there is like a lot more behind from a data perspective.
I did. I was briefed on it and was shared, potential revenue that would be received from Suzano. So I do have information on that.
And just a note in that it's challenging because you want there to be full public transparency in the basis for any decision. And Option has shared that sometimes in the marine shipping business, the more detail you put out with your financials, the more likely someone's going to try to steal what you're doing. So even when I worked at Commerce, there were exemptions from Public Records Act for confidential and proprietary business information. I'm not saying that this is specifically that, but I do think it's the kind of thing that probably doesn't get presented in open committee for that reason. And so I do recognize it. I talked to a fellow commissioner of the sort of weird bind it puts us in. But very happy for the work that's being done.
Yes, the shipping business is incredibly competitive, and there are a lot of other ports in the Pacific Northwest that would love to have this customer. No question.
I had the privilege of meeting them when they came, the shipwrights and the people on the ship, and going to the warehouse and seeing all the paper product and the forklifts being used, and it's amazing.
I'm very proud of our marine terminal staff. We provide a level of service that they have not previously seen.
Great, thanks, Mark. So let's check and see if there's any public comment on this advisory item, the capital budget amendment, marine terminal warehouse. Any hands raised, Missy?
Yes, John Newman has his hand raised.
Newman.
Yes, sir. How are you doing tonight, Commissioner?
Good.
I'm with some other comments about, so in the past, we had a contractor to the port that promised a 10-year contract and then bailed in 1 year, and we were left with the improvements and no work. This warehouse expansion is supposed to pay off in 5 years. You know, unless the contractor is willing to, you know, promise work for 2.5 years to pay for 50% of it. And as another commissioner mentioned, the port business is very competitive. So, you know, they could run over to somebody else and say, you know, give us a cheaper rate and we'll take our bulk paper somewhere else. We don't have paper processing facilities here. You know, they do in North Bend, Oregon, they do in other places. So unless the customer wants to not just promise, but commit to 2.5 year worth of product, it doesn't seem very much of a good idea for the port. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Any other public comment on the capital budget amendment, Marine Terminal Warehouse? All right, hearing none other, we'll move on to item number 3 in the advisory calendar, which is recommendation of federal lobbying, excuse me, recommendation of federal lobbying services. Alex Smith, Executive Director.
All right.
Have the floor.
Thank you, Commission President Ayal. We'll try to make this one quick. Thanks for hanging with us in this meeting, commissioners and members of the public who've stuck with us. This is an advisory only about federal legislative services for the port. In May, we issued a request for proposals for legislative services. The request for proposals included federal lobbying within the scope of services. All of the firms that responded included a federal option, but for an additional monthly fee. And Propolis Communications was selected for the state lobbying services, and that contract was approved by you on July 8th. So the federal lobbying firm details. So as I said, all firms who responded included an option for federal lobbying services. Propolis suggested Ellerbe Government Affairs. It's led by Crystal Ellerbe, who formerly spent 5 years as the Vice President for Federal Relations at Strategies 360. If approved, Ellerbe Government Affairs would be a subcontractor to Propolis. The subcontract would be an amendment to Propolis's contract, and it would the contract itself would increase by $48,000 a year, and that's a $4,000 per month fee. That would total to over 3 years, $144,000 over the life of the contract. This would make the new annual to exceed total for Propolis $108,000 per year and $324,000 over the life of the contract. And we'll come back to you at the September 9th, 2024 meeting for approval. In the packet, there was information on Crystal Ellerbe. And I would also note that we had a lobbying with a firm in Washington, D.C. for federal lobbying. We had a contract, and they charged $7,500 a month. And so this would actually get us comparable services for $4,000 a month. And Ms. Ellerbe, in conversations with her, has indicated that federal appropriations is like her thing, which is great given all the projects we have and our desire to really get some federal assistance with those projects. So happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Posada?
No question.
No questions. Commissioner Hardy?
Oh.
You went, well, we've run out of questions.
Benefit of going last. Thank you very much, commissioners, but.
Thank you, Executive Director. Is there any public comment on the federal lobbying services? Any hands up, Missy?
Hands.
All right, we will move along then to Commissioner reports and discussions. I think Commissioner Hardy, would you like to start?
Certainly. My quote of the day is from C.S. Lewis. When the whole world is running towards a cliff, he who is running in the opposite direction appears to have lost his mind.
That's it.
Let that sink in for a moment. Commissioner Tong, any reports, discussion?
Just wanted to say I enjoyed the budget retreat. I think that was a beneficial meeting with the directors and the group. I think we got to some good outcomes, and I think it was just helpful overall. Thank you.
And I echo Commissioner Tong.
Okay. Commissioner Vasal.
Yes, 3 reports. I enjoyed the budget retreat as well, and Missy has reported that under past meetings for August 5th, you can now see the recording and supporting documents are posted. And if members of the public have a hard time finding them, please contact Camille St. Onge. No, it's under past meetings. Second, I serve, because of my position on the Port Commission, on the Transportation Planning Board, and they have shared on behalf of the Washington State Transportation Commission that they're having a Lollapalooza of public workshops this August, 4 upcoming virtual meetings on the state's 20-year plan for climate, funding, community, and equity. If that's exciting, I would say in that case, maybe Google Washington State, not Google, use your favorite search engine to look for Washington State Transportation Commission future, and you'll find it. Second, the third thing is the Sea Level Rise Executive Committee. I share with Commissioner Sanders and Dr. Pamela Braff, Marine Sciences PhD, who we are lucky to have chairing that committee. It includes Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, the Port, and Thurston County. She sent out a final report on one phase of that work today, so probably our staff haven't read it yet, called it's the Funding and Governance Evaluation. By way of background, I'm not going to talk about the report that got sent out today, but that this multi-jurisdictional group has decided that protecting our downtown is the feasible and most economical choice for the city of Olympia, rather than retreating due to sea level rise. And so the plans that are being built already are calling for some changes in construction, like higher minimum floor elevations for new construction downtown. We as the port can be working on things like the shoreline plan, because we own the shoreline. But in these reports, if you want to dig into them, you'll see that the living shoreline is something we can embrace out of habitat and aesthetic value for all of us. I mean, who doesn't love to see thriving ecosystem, but probably doesn't have a lot to do with preventing flooding from sea level rise because of certain characteristics of our low-lying land areas and their relation to the shoreline. And so I won't go into too much detail, but we have scientists leading this work from the city of Olympia. And I think no matter what, I support living shorelines, but sea level rise isn't really the reason for us to do a living shoreline. The reasons have 1,000 other species names. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on to other business. Is there any other business?
I have a few things to add to the agenda setting meetings to discuss at a later time. I was discussing with one of my fellow commissioners about the heavy lift organizationally that we're undergoing with transition and projects. And if there was a way that the commission could relieve some of that pressure and potentially, just as an idea, for 6 months, cutting one of our meetings for the month. Because we know that there's an immense amount of time and effort that goes into preparing for the meetings. Whether or not that's a good idea, I have no idea. But some way that the commission could alleviate some of the workload as we recognize that we are asking for everything all at once. So that's just one idea, but further discussion with the commission as to ways the commission can recognize our sense of urgency on everything. And if there's ways that we could work on that. The second thing was Joel Hanson with the POCAC mentioned the POCAC vacancies. Previously, we looked at those on a rolling basis. I know there were some changes, but I think that's something we should talk about and have a set policy so that there's clear expectations for people applying to the POCAC. I know that Camille St. Onge has been working very diligently on that. And I think it would help the POCAC if there was clear direction from the commission. Lastly, I don't know whether this needs to be a further discussion, but just flagging it, the DNR legacy forest cuts that the Thurston County Commission removed from, the cut list. This happened last year, I believe. And there's now some continued dialogue around the revenue implications for our, what are they called? Secondary tax. Junior tax districts, such as Timberland Regional Library, such as the school districts, such as the Port of Olympia. There are a bunch of numbers floating around that no one can seem to verify what the real impact is, but I think this is something that we need to be tracking as an organization because both politically, if there's advocacy that needs to happen, and organizationally, because it could have a very large impact on our budget. Whether that's good or bad is a further discussion. And what that looks like, I can't seem to get a clear answer.
I happen to know a few people at DNR.
Perfect.
Including some who actually do all the calculations about what taxing districts receive, and would the commission would like a presentation on that, or just?
I am not trying to create another, refer to Exhibit A where I said we're asking too much of you. But I would just put it on your radar that if any of if the commission as a whole or the staff see that as something that really needs to be elevated, then yes. But at this point, just putting it on everyone's radar.
I could just put in a call and see if I can get accurate information.
Yeah. Some of the discussion was that the numbers being floated are over the course of multi-year, so they're overstating the impact on the budgets. I don't know. So some sort of formal numbers would probably be good at some point if it seems like it's rolling down. And that is all.
All right, thank you for that. Is there any other business?
On that note, are we having an agenda setting meeting in September, or maybe that's in meetings? I can answer that.
I think the idea is to have every work session is an agenda setting. An hour is dedicated to agenda setting.
In every work session.
And here you go, upcoming meetings. Consistent with number one, Exhibit A, whatever you said, Commissioner. In August, we only have one commission meeting. So this was it for August. Our next commission meeting is Monday, September 9th. It'll be a regular business meeting at 5:30 p.m. right here. On September 16th, there's the commission work session at which half an hour will be dedicated to agenda setting. On Tuesday, September 17th, there is a Citizens at Work Community Advisory Committee meeting. And that is 6 p.m. here in this room as well. And on Monday, September 23rd, another regular commission business meeting. And I think that is it.
Any questions on the meeting announcements? Questions or comments? Hearing none, this meeting.
Yes.